Opinion members, as you're coming in. You're used to me doing a little bit of patter while we let everybody in. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I guess if you're in the East Coast, no, if you're on the West Coast, it still might be morning, but I give you permission to drink anyway, even if it's before noon. So there's Kim Chen showing her Fleur de Cholette, and I am drinking some of Floris's wine, but I'm going to keep it secret for now. Floris has his with him, and Floris, you're allowed because it's 7 o'clock in the evening for you. Yes. And David Markovich and David Pasquino, I hope you've got some wine with you. Excellent, excellent. David Markovich is working, so I told him he can't drink until 5 o'clock.
We still have an afternoon meeting, Michael.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, you have to be sober for that, for sure. So welcome everybody. I won't take too long today because it's the 2 minutes past the hour, and we tend to have this 30 minutes or so, depending on how many questions there are. Do ask as many questions as you like by typing them into the chat. I think I still tell people how Zoom works, and down at the bottom, if you move your cursor, you'll see chat there, and you can always enter something in the chat, and we'll get to it as we go. Floris Leemstra is one of our top partners, I don't mind saying, and I don't say that to everybody, Floris, is that he's been a remarkable partner with wines for us. He's the feature wine this year in the Languedoc offering, and he's also got the Founder's Choice, which we may get to talk about, even though it's top secret and we'd have to kill you all. And so why don't we just get to it? I understand, Floris, that you're sitting in the cool because it's extremely hot outside still in France.
It's hi everybody. Great to be on this call. It's always really nice to share and well, and this way meet everybody. And hope you're enjoying a glass of wine. It is indeed, Michael. It is 35 degrees right now. It's 7 o'clock in the evening.
It's 7 o'clock at night.
Pretty cooled down. It went up to a little bit more to like 37, 38. So it's slowly cooling down. But yeah, the best place to be is the cellar where it's, and even I can look on the temperature gauge of it's 17 degrees here right now, which is lovely.
I'll be right there.
Yeah. Plus, I'm surrounded by a couple of 100,000 liters of wine, so we can have a party.
Yeah. So you made the cover this month. Here you are.
That's actually. I really love the fact that you picked that picture because it's really the essence of how we function. So I'm Dutch. My wife is half New Zealander and half Dutch, and she actually grew up in Canada. And I will actually be boarding a plane in 2 days from now on my way to Prince Edward County, where I'm going to spend my summer, which I do every year because that's our family home. But I mean, the kids were born in Burgundy, and then they were sort of uprooted and grew up here in the south of France. And we've always tried to get them involved with the wine business. And that picture on the cover of your magazine is very much how we function. I really dare say it's a real family company, and they're involved. They have their opinion to say. You know, we're not sure. They're young, 21 and 25. So will they ever take over? Who knows? But I mean, I really love the fact that you picked that picture, because for us to be able to share our profession, which is not just our profession, but also our passion with our kids is extremely important. And yeah, the only problem now is at 25, they drink more wine than I do, which is especially when they come with a whole bunch of friends.
But they get it wholesale.
they actually negotiated for free, which for me as a Dutchman is really hard to accept. No, it's fun, but it's nice that yeah, we've been working together with Opinion now for I think more than 15 years.
Well, and I can attest that having visited you last year with Opinion members, that you and your family have far too much fun there. It hardly seems like work at all.
It's probably the one thing I always say is the biggest, how do you say, luck or the best thing in my life is that the fact is that I wake up in the morning and I go to work doing something I love doing, and I think it's also downtime. It's like being in the kitchen, right? If you're making a meal without any inspiration, without any passion, then it's gonna be just a meal. Whereas you can make it just ever so much different when you have this passion.
So let's turn to page 3 to the feature wine. We wanted to talk about that as best we can. Yes, you have a bottle. I do not.
No, because it's not even actually. This bottle is a fake bottle because it's actually not a big bottle. It's still on barrel. This is it. And so Malbec, we planted it about 7 or 8 years ago, and because I just love Malbec, and it's a grape variety that everybody knows from Argentina for sure. In France, it's a little bigger than in the what we call the southwest, in the Cahors region, but it's also getting really well implanted in the Languedoc. And so we planted some less than a hectare. I think it's like 0.7 of a hectare. A little bit as a test, sort of 7-8 years ago. 8 years ago. And the first years the vineyard is young and kind of needs to implant itself, and the root system needs to set itself in place. But so the first couple of years we blended it mainly with other wines we make, and then over the last 2-3 years we've been tasting it, and then it would go into a blend, but we've been tasting it, and we're sort of like, oh, it's kind of a shame, this is some serious stuff. And then last year, you and Greg said, well, next year is our 50th anniversary. We want to do some nice wines, and let's look at some special cuvées and what can we select. And I just dawned on me, like, instead of selecting something, why don't we just actually make something that we've never done before? So we had made the Malbec before, but we then sat down. So we have 2 in-house winemakers plus myself, and then we have a consultant that kind of pulls our head out of the sand every now and again when we think that we're doing a great job, but we need to get real. And so we sat down and I said, okay, well, we've seen this Malbec grow over the last 8 years. What can we do to make it really, really awesome? And so I won't go into too much of a technical detail in terms of the vinification process, but what we've done is that basically we fermented it in one of these stainless steel tanks, which are what we call thermoregulated, so we can keep it cool. So by keeping it cool, we stopped the fermentation. Well, no, we didn't stop the fermentation. We did not let it ferment for about a week. So the grapes, the destemmed grapes, were sitting in the tank and they couldn't ferment. It was too cold. And it's like basically like macerating a really, really good piece of meat in a marinade, a marinade, I should say marinade. So you just let it sit there, and what it does, it extracts a lot of fruit, it extracts a lot of color, as you can see, it extracts a lot of flavor, but it extracts no tannins, because for the tannins, you need a solvent that come out of the skins. And so the solvent is, in this case, alcohol. And the alcohol will let the tannins release from the skins. But because we kept it cold, it wasn't fermenting, so there was no alcohol, so there was no tannic extraction. So for 1 week, we just let it sit there under cover of nitrogen, so it couldn't oxidize. And we just basically made this massive fruit bomb. And then we started, after a week, we started fermentation, and literally gently fermented. It's quite cool, where you have a little bit of tannins that come into it. And it just made this big, luscious, big and luscious, just like me. And then after that, when it's finished, we put it on these barrels for about 25-30%, and the rest stayed in tank, which is still the case. It still has not been bottled. So I get a little sneak.
Is that process that you've just described, Floris, is that unique to you? I'm not sure I've ever heard of that before.
We kind of like to push the boundaries a little bit sometimes.
That's truly amazing.
So
it makes perfect sense, right? There's no alcohol yet, so the tannins from those skins aren't going to get into the juice, right?
Yeah, we use it's a process called bioprotection. We have a very special yeast cell that protects it, that doesn't allow the indigenous yeast to install itself. It's a little technical. There's a lot of angles to it, but the other thing is that because we use this special yeast cell to protect it during the cold maceration, we can't use any sulfites. So because obviously sulfites are sterilizing, and so we don't use sulfites during the vinification or even the maturing process. We just added a tiny bit before bottling, which is really interesting, because I'm not against sulfites, but I think the use of copious amounts of sulfites is really easy. It's cheap, it's cheerful, and it's very easy to work with. It's not more complicated not to use them. And so we only probably added the first tiny bit of sulfites just recently, when the temperatures were going up, to make sure there was no volatile acidity and so forth. But sulfites are very sterilizing and also very reductive. So it really closes up the fruit structure. So right now, we have a wine that is like an explosion of fruit. But because of this long pre-fermentation maceration, it also has quite a lot of structure, but not a hard structure. It's like a luscious, big, chewy, juicy structure, and not a dry, tough structure. So, I mean, you put this with a well-matured piece of Côte de Boeuf, as we would say in France. Now, I'm offending all the vegans and vegetarians around you, but you can replace that by a nice cauliflower steak or something. But
and when somebody orders this, Floris, it's going to be ready to drink when it arrives. But it looks like the Master of Wine has suggested it's good in cellar until 2028 as well. And yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if you would say it would even go even longer than that, based on what you've described to me.
Yeah, I think it probably could go longer than that, because it's got a big structure. Sorry, if anybody wonders what I'm doing with my hand, is I got my buddy Miles here who loves tastings, and even his other buddy. But so I'm surrounded by those. Miles, what do you think of the
yes.
He's on a dry spell right now.
He's had enough today.
No, definitely. I think I'm probably a little bit deformed because I'm drinking wine from tank all day, every day, and so my palate has gotten used to quite young wines, and I'm always looking for that really luscious, vibrant young fruit. But because it's got so much of it, the problem what you have often with wines is that when they have a big structure, when that big structure kind of softens, then the fruit is already gone. I think here you have a big structure, but it's not tough, so you could totally drink it right now. Got a lovely big luscious fruit. So we'll be bottling this next month for you guys, and then it's going to get shipped. So it will probably hit Canada come the end of the year, I'd say. No. So we will have had sort of 6 months in the bottle by the time you get it. And that wine, when it gets bottled, we have to take it out of the tank and out of the barrels and blend it and filter it and then bottle it. So it has what we call bottle shock. It's a little bit shaken up, and then it gets transported. So by the time it gets to Canada, it's been 6 months since bottling. So if you would want to drink it straight away on a winter night with a nice sun hardening dish, it would be delicious.
And many of you on the call will have heard me say before, when I get a case of 6 in, I always drink one immediately and get a good sense of it and make some notes, and then decide how long I want to keep that in cellar. I typically will drink one a year until I have one bottle left, and then I let it get super old. I had said, Floris, I'm going to share some pictures. It was actually a 2011 Evangile that I had with some Berkshire pork that I found in the cellar. It was absolutely marvelous. So that's great. And David on the call, he said is it okay for him to say that he's coming to see you with Billy and Cato, who you are fully familiar with, Floris. That though some people may be familiar with Billy's Best Bottles, it's Billy writes a book each year about the best wines in Canada, and he's a huge fan of yours, Floris, and he and his wife bring a group every year. And in fact, one of our board members, Cynthia, brings a group to you every year as well, doesn't she? And does a cooking class and such.
That's great. She actually lives in the county, Prince Edward County.
That's right. You'll be seeing her next week, I bet.
Just say the county because that's where I hang out here in Canada.
Yeah.
Big tip. Yeah, so
no, that's marvelous.
A lovely cooking school in I forget the name of because she just moved to this wonderful old house.
Yeah.
So she in Canada, and then she brings people over for cooking lessons here in South France.
So we've been given permission by the higher ups to talk about the founder's choice that you've made for this offering as well. Why don't we do a little bit about that? I am not familiar with it because I'm kept in the dark as well. So I'm really curious to hear about it.
Well, all right. It's probably one of my favorite wines I've ever made. It's definitely worth joining your program for because. So anyway, story started last year. Victoria and we lived in Burgundy for about 17 years, and we often go once a year. We call it our little dirty weekend, and we go and have delicious food and see our friends and drink terribly overpriced Burgundies and have a lovely time. So, which we did last year in July. And then on our way down, we stopped in a village just under Lyon, a village called Ampuis. And Ampuis is the bastion of the northern part of the Rhone, which is what we call the Rhône septentrional. And the most famous wine from the village of Ampuis is a wine called Côte Rôtie. Côte Rôtie, and then you have producers like Gigal, which are actually the most famous ones. Anyway, so we had lunch and tasted a little bit of Côte Rôtie during our lunch, which is utterly delicious. The thing about Côte Rôtie, other than the extraordinary terroir on the banks of the Rhone River, and it's quite steep, and that's why it's called Côte, is also that it's a mix of two grapes, Syrah and Viognier. So a red Syrah with a white Viognier. And normally they put in, I think percentage is around 5 to 10% of white Viognier in the Syrah. It's not a blend. It's actually you co-ferment the two grapes together. So it's you harvest the two grapes at the same time, and then you get the Côte Rôtie. Anyway, we had this lunch and tasted some Côte Rôtie. I've always loved it, and I kind of fell in love with it again. So we drove back home, and this is just before the harvest, so this time of the year. And so I said to Pierre and Nathalie, our winemakers, guys, we are going to make a Côte Rôtie on steroids. We're not doing 5 or 10%. We're going to do Syrah 80%, Viognier 20%. We're going to go full Monty and just see what happens. And obviously, and I love doing this. It's a little bit of a risk, and it's stupid and whatever. But you need to kind of let yourself go. And also, were it not to be at all interesting, we could probably rectify some stage during the process, or you need to, and that's my role in the cellar. I've got some really, really competent winemakers, and I'm kind of the stupid one. And so we did, and
you've got some in your glass there.
I have. So we co-fermented. So we left some of our Viognier to continue to ripen, and then we harvested it the same day as our Syrah. We took a really nice, quite a big structure Syrah, and we added 20% of Viognier to it and co-fermented it, and it's just become this explosive bomb of. On one hand, you have the big, dark blackberry, blackcurrant, violet, a little bit of spice from Syrah, and all of a sudden you have more the exotic side of the Viognier, which is more the apricot, the lychee, and so it kind of clashes, but somehow it doesn't. It's completely married, and it makes this big, juicy, complex, really tasty wine. So, all right, to show you how much I like it, sometimes at the end of the day when we leave the office, living on a winery, it's probably the best way to become an alcoholic. So sometimes you say, okay, no, we're not opening a bottle. Let me just walk into the cellar. I literally go with 2 glasses, and I take a glass for myself, for my wife and myself, and that's our ration for the evening. And for the last 6 months, every time I've gone into the cellar, I've taken this wine. So obviously, Viognier mixed in with 80% of Syrah. I cannot call it Côte Rôtie because that is appellation and highly protected. And so
So show us the label then.
I find a new name, and so I made a new label, and it's called Canet Rôtie. So please come and get me out of prison when the people in the Côte d'Ivoire.
So I can say to anybody who's on the call that's not in the Founders Choice program needs to get in it right now. What I have in my glass here is one that Floris made for us in 2019, and it's drinking wonderfully and still has some time left in the cellar, so I won't be drinking all of these. I didn't get the one that was hand signed by you, Floris, that got us a week at your, I know people call it a gîte, but I call it a gite. That's
Cottage. Yeah.
Yes. Did anybody ever claim that prize? Do you know? You don't even remember the prize, do you?
Yeah. I think that someone did. Yeah, I think someone.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I'm
being vague about it because it's really that's the best recipe of a good marriage when you work together. So Victoria looks after our whole hospitality side, and I look after the wine side, and so it's perfect. So we really can be able, although we work in the same office, we can come home tonight and say, how was your day, dear?
Yes. Right. Well, so if anybody has any questions for Floris, please put them into the chat. In the meantime, I would like to I'd like to share my screen, which Kim Chen, I need you to give me permission to share my screen. And I wanted to show you some things that I actually did a pairing with the meats that you'll have seen in the catalog that we now have a partnership with Maître D in Montreal, where they ship really top quality meat across the country using dry ice. It was rock solid when it arrived for me, and I cooked something, and I actually paired it with Floris's Les Evangiles. Have I said it right that time, Floris? Yes, good.
Perfect.
And so can I share my screen? Yes. So here are some of the pictures of this meal that I made. This is the Berkshire pork that comes in a box from Montreal, and so I put it together. This came into an email to everybody, but this was the finished meal with a 2011 Les Evangiles, and what a pairing! It was so beautiful. You wouldn't typically, I would say, Floris, pair this with a pork, but this pork is just the Berkshire is just so flavorful. It's got so much going on that it stood up beautifully to the wine and kind of that am I okay to say fruit forwardness of this particular wine? It paired so beautifully with this meal. It was just, I absolutely loved it. So, and there it is. And I've got a vertical in the cellar of these two wines that we typically put together in a case. So we've got the Les Evangiles, and what's the other one, please, Floris?
La Chapelle.
Oui. And so there you get three bottles of each in a wooden case. It's amazing. I buy it every year, and I can't say enough. So there you are. Okay, and then we do have some questions here, it looks like. Bear with me. Is daughter content to make really good value wines? When will she spread her wings?
Interesting. Well,
yes.
That's a very good question, because so we have in 2018 bought a few vineyards in Limoux, which is a very Burgundian terroir here in the south of France. So it's in the Pyrenees Mountains at 400 meters high, where we can actually make a proper Pinot, which is here at Canet would be too hot. But in Limoux, 40 minutes from here, it's a very doable thing. So we called that vineyard at the time, we called it Domaine for Oliver, our son, who was born in Hospice de Beaune and grown up in the vineyards of Château Canet. And obviously, that kind of not TikTok, but daughter was probably a little bit jealous. So we have just bought a small vineyard in an appellation very close to us, about half an hour into the Montagne Noire. Again, slightly higher, but the interesting thing is it's probably the smallest appellation of the Languedoc. The Languedoc being the biggest vineyard in the world, but it has all these appellations. So here we're in the Minervois. We've got some vineyards in Limoux with Domaine, and now in the Cabardès we have this small vineyard which has a particularity that, from the rules, the brief of the rules of the appellation oblige us to do half of Bordeaux grapes and half of Languedoc grapes. So you'll get blends of Syrah Grenache with Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. And after the 2018 vineyard that we created called Domaine, we felt we needed to then now honor our daughter and get her involved in this. And so this is called, the new domain is called the Clos Charlotte.
So already spreading her wings, in fact.
She is indeed. And first harvest will be in 2023.
Wonderful. There you are, Brendan. And Jean-Paul was asking for more information about the mixed case, which we've put in the chat for everybody. And I've certainly talked about the Les Evangiles from it. And do you want to talk a little bit more about
Sure.
the La Chapelle?
I think it's got so you talk about the Evangile. So the Evangile was the first was our top wine we made since the very beginning. It's a Syrah. It's 100% aged in these barrels. These are 228 liter Burgundy barrels. 30% will be new, 30% 1-year-old, 30% 2-year-olds. So that's our Evangile is that. So it's a big Syrah with a lot of fruit, a lot of extraction. You got spice and the black fruit, and it was our top wine. And so we make between 4,000 and 6,000 bottles a year. It sounds like a lot of bottles, but it's not a lot. No. And we sell them. So then, because we sell them and it's a top wine, we were thinking, well, we need something else at that level, and we then thought maybe we should just make some more of Les Evangiles, but then we would probably jeopardize the quality, and so we didn't want to do that. So we said let's find something different, and we had this very old Grenache But they've always went into just a Minervois. It was part of our Grenache. We made 3-4 vats of tanks of Grenache, and it goes into the Minervois. But it's really, really old. So we decided to say 1 year old. What happens if we ferment it just by itself? Because we could see, well, you can't see, but there's the reception part of the grapes, and we weigh whatever comes in from each vineyard, and so we know the yield because you just convert the tonnage. Like you need 130 kilos for 100 liters of wine. So you know how much you get for a vineyard, and then this vineyard was so old that the yield was extremely, extremely low. So we were saying, well, we probably need to consider ripping it out and plant a new vineyard because it's just a cycle of vineyard life, I suppose. And then we vinified it separately just to see what it would give, and it was so incredibly good that okay, this will be the basis of our new top-end wine that we can put next to Les Évangiles, which is the Syrah. And then we made La Chapelle, which is the name of the vineyard, that is a Grenache. The only big difference, other than the vinified more or less the same way, but so obviously one is Syrah on oak, and La Chapelle, a Grenache when it's properly ripe. So when I say properly ripe, it's probably 15.5%, because otherwise it won't express its fruit and its flavors, and the tannins will be too dry. So it's a big wine, but we decided not to put it on oak because it's got such a beautiful aroma of blackberry, not blackberry, blackberry fruit, that I didn't want to hide it behind a big wall of vanilla.
I'm looking forward to that. And just to clarify, we put it in the chat. It's actually 2 bottles each of the La Chapelle 2020, the Les Évangiles 2020, and Les Évangiles 2019. So thank you so very much.
It's tasting really, really well right now. The Évangile 2019.
Yes. Ah, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Flores, for your time. Really appreciate it. Don't go outside. It's too hot. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Cheers to everybody. Thanks, Kim Chen, for running the board. Appreciate it. And we'll see everybody again on the next one. Cheers.
Cheers. See you in September, Flores.
Like to see you then. Are you're going to come in September with Cynthia?
With Billy and Kato.
Oh, sorry. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool.
No,
I'll see you
end of September. So I'll be spending a lot of time with you.
right here in the center.
It sounds like a plan. Take care. See you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.